you can't out accelerate your max V. So those are like, those absolutes are like limiters on the whole system. But likewise, and this is why within, say field or court sports where, you might never come close to touching max velocity. It's a third sort of reserve that I talk about, and it's a neural reserve. The most stressful thing that you can put your nervous system through, and I've talked like to Rolf Ullman on my podcast about this, is organizing a movement in an increasingly short amount of time. Yeah, right? Like if we add, that's how training works. We add time that allows us to add tension. We create that added tension because we're able through that added time to stimulate more motor units. This is sort of why, like Louis Simmons would say, you can't lift a heavy weight slow. You have to stimulate enough motor units to create the tension to overcome that weight. If it takes you too long, you fail that rep. You might have had the motor units, but you have to coordinate them fast enough to meet the demands of the activity. Sprinting, and where people start saying things that I, get really sort of triggered by, like, strong enough. Sprinting it's the ultimate test of, and when I say sprinting, I mean like max velocity is the ultimate test of the organization of the system within very narrow time demands. So the faster you can run, the easier organizing sub-maximal movements becomes. So the faster your body can move, the slower pitching now feels relative to the demands, relative to the capacity of the body's ability to organize. The faster you can sprint, the slower, relatively, the demands of acceleration are. Likewise, you're still dealing with time, so you have to be able to accelerate fast enough so that you can use the available time to improve your max velocity sprint. You're only going to accelerate for about 5 seconds.
Right.
If you look at Olympic, again, to piggyback off of a conversation I was having right before this with somebody about acceleration versus max V, and in regards to like 40s, if you look at Olympic sprinters, they don't take a breath for their first 40 yards. The reason why they're not taking a breath for their first 40 yards is because they're reliant upon, like they're accelerating. And when you're accelerating, you're more tense. You're not getting into relaxed max velocity mechanics until after you breathe. That relaxation and conservation of energy thing doesn't happen until so far down the track. So I look at everything as some people are very into speed, some people are very into strength, and they have trouble reconciling those two things. Once you have sort of a grasp of both of those things, now you add in that component of time and understanding how the allotment of time that you have now, allows you to gamify a lot of things, and it changes sort of how you look at things.
I think that's a really good point. The adaptation. So you talked about adaptation, and you touched on it. The whole thing to me about whether it's strength or speed or throwing a ball faster,
they're all the same thing.
Right. To getting right. Like, why? If it's not just about recruiting the neurons and trying to change everything to be more fast twitch, it's about the actual thing that you're working and that adaptation of that. And that's one of the things that I think, and you talked about it greatly just there, that I think some of the stuff with the sprint based movement, sprint based football movement, now it's applying to other sports obviously as well, but that movement doesn't discuss the adaptation is what you're really working on. You're working on that adaptation, and then when just like with strength development, right, and explosion, let's say you're sprinting 2 days per week, two to three maximal reps, whatever that is, and you start to reach a point where you're getting to be where you can be at that time of your life cycle, right? Because if you're talking about children and youth athletes and high school athletes and even college athletes, right? They're still developing up until, I can't remember what the age is, but something like 25, 26 or whatever, when it starts,
I think it's like 25, 25. I think it's like 25 or 26.
Whatever you're quote unquote full grown.
Yeah.
So some of it, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, we have to be careful with in development and saying, I'm giving these gains, but some of it as well is that the fact that they're growing, right? And they're getting stronger. Now, obviously you're training, right? Those are recruiting it, but measuring what is real gains and what is growth as a human being, right? That's a very difficult part, which is one of the issues I have with it. Okay. When I get into discussion, because we push that aside, not you, I'm saying, but like that's pushed aside, like, hey, so I see the clips of this person who ran 10 whatever, and it's like, okay, well, he probably also was lifting and went from 150 pounds to 170 pounds of muscle and all these things, so all these things kind of work in concert is my main point on it, right? And yes, the speed thing is creating the maximal output, but then you also, just like in lifting, right? If I just went in 1 rep max, let's say twice per week, okay, I would, you probably would never recommend doing that, but let's say you would reach some sort of plateau, right? You would get to a plateau point if I was just doing that exercise to 2 days a week. There would come to a point where my development would certainly probably, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, certainly get near stopping, right? Not accounting for me getting older as a young athlete or anything like that, and I'd have to do other things to develop, whether it's rep changes or exercise changes, to then push through that, where I could then start to recruit the fibers to get maximal effort. Can you talk a little? I don't know if I'm way off. This is kind of my thought process, having worked with so many athletes over the years. And much like you, I grew up with my father's still a track coach and was a phys ed teacher, and really
still going.
I was he had me working out, which was an advantage back then, not an advantage anymore in youth sports because everybody works out. But back then it was an advantage. At 10 years old, I was working out and lifting and started to develop and certain things, which helped carry me through. I thought it was one of the things beyond sprinting and all that kind of stuff that helped me to become a better athlete earlier. Okay, so when I did hit puberty, now I could start to really safely lift more weights and all those kind of things. I was able to recruit more different, and yes, there's training methods were different back then, but I was bigger, faster, stronger. Like my father got me Bigger, Faster, Stronger magazine, became obsessed with it. Stefan Fernholm, I still remember the guy's name. I would work. I was doing all the stuff associated with that. It certainly helped me. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what I'm talking about, like the importance of the totality of all these things, right? And in development, and not getting caught up in the fact that, yes, a kid is getting older and he is going to get stronger if you are working him out with whatever you're working him out with.
Yeah. Well, so again, it goes back to that reconciliation of time and understanding the arc of time. So now we're talking about like the arc of time in terms of a person's physical development. So number one, understand that our physical evolution is thousands of years behind where society stands right now. Our lifespans are so long. We have, again, compared to other organisms, we have relatively few children. We, have taken over the world as a species, but we move slowly. But our minds allow us to make these external things around us that adapt and change very fast. So society has changed a ton, but genetically, we are like a pre-industrial revolution species, right? So, modern medicine and modern convenience of, and all these modern systems have allowed us to live these very long, comfortable lives. But what we're evolved for is, in essence, and you can see this within development, especially when you work with kids and especially when you time kids, right? I went back and I took over 100,000 combine results over the course of a decade. And I charted averages by age, right? And from 7th to 12th grade, the average vertical jump improved by about 5 inches in boys. Okay, now they underwent massive physical change, and their average vertical jump improved by like 5.4 inches. You can easily improve that in a couple months with directed training.
Correct.
Right? But for the average person does not have directed training. So even when we start talking about training, there's such a wide variance on that. Yeah, everyone trains these days, and these are relatively recent combine results. So this is all like 2013 to 2023 type stuff. But the biggest increase within that happened, essentially right around puberty, like coming out of puberty. So between, say, 9th and 10th grade would be the biggest change. And then between 10th and 11th grade would be a very small change. And then something very interesting starts to happen. Between 11th and 12th grade, at some combines, there's no change. The kids get heavier, but they don't get any faster, and they don't jump any higher. And in many cities, they got slightly slower. They jump slightly lower, slightly, but it's statistically significant.
Right.
We talk about like the freshman 15. Kids who don't go to college get the freshman 15 too.
Yeah, they do.
Right? Kids who, we're aging.
Correct.
We're aging.
It's the natural maturation process, right? Like the just growth that just comes automatically.
Right. But so when you look at like pro athletes, that prime is like late 20s.
Right.
But when we look at people like at large, our prime is 10th, 11th grade. For most people, 10th, 11th grade is the peak of your athletic development.
Mike, I read a statistic that like most adults don't ever sprint past like age, I think it was like 27. Like a human will never sprint top speed ever. I don't know where I got it from. I don't know where I read it, but like that sounded about par for the course. You know what I mean?
No, it's true, but it's also, we acknowledge all that like in our 20s. We think about sort of like this line of, if you are an athlete, right? Like here's you in high school, and then we think this is you in college, and then maybe you get out into the pros and it's a slower taper up, but you're tapering up and out. And we think about like, if you're, not a pro athlete, that's like, here's you in high school and here's you in college, and then a sort of slow down.
That's it. Yeah.
But the reality is, start watching. Here's girls at 15. Here's girls at 17. Here's boys at 17. Here's boys at 18. We're already on the slide down.
Right.
And what happens is pre-puberty, we are all very weak, right? When we contract our tissue, it doesn't create a lot of tension, doesn't create a lot of force. That also means that it doesn't take much energy, right? And how this plays out in the real world is, or biologically and developmentally, essentially before puberty, you are prey. You are a small, weak animal that is exposed to a number of threats. Now, luckily, we live in like a modern civilized society, and you're generally very safe, as safe as you've ever been in, the expanse of human history. But biologically, you're thousands of years behind that. Your body just knows, like, I'm vulnerable, I'm exposed. When you put your foot in the ground to run, you don't cover much ground. So what is the evolutionary, and you also don't exert much energy. You don't spend many calories to do it. So the biological mechanism there that is there to keep you alive is, we can't create distance. We can't create displacement. We better turn our feet over fast. We can't move. We can't hit very hard. So we better move very fast. We better have super fast reflexes so that when a larger animal, and the number one prey sort of historically for humans, or the number one predator, is other humans. And you can see this, like, if you're a parent and you've got a small child, you can get down the hall way faster than them. But when it's time for, to put them to bed, for whatever reason, this 30-pound tiny little human is just, like they're Barry Sanders all of a sudden.
Right.
Every time you reach for them, they're half a step ahead of you. They twist and turn and bob and weave. That's a biological defense mechanism. And it's possible because they don't create any energy expenditure when they're that small. So they can move and they can react. They can make so many decisions so fast. Now, they also don't have a frontal lobe, so they're limited on what kind of decisions they can make.
Right.
But then you hit puberty, and all of a sudden, especially with males, testosterone starts flowing. All of a sudden, now you're getting a lot stronger. But there's a cost to that now. Now, everything that you do takes energy. And so your brain starts to throttle down your neural efficiency unless it is supported with extreme stimulus, meaning training. But if we tease this all the way out, so you've got two things happening. You start to get naturally stronger in a big way, which allows you to make fewer decisions, but create a lot more havoc and chaos with each one. And the stronger you get, the more devastation you're capable of, but also the more energy that it takes. So your brain starts to slow down. The same sprinter, if you look over the career of a long sprinter, or of a sprinter over a long duration of time, their turnover starts to slow down. But whether it's Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, who even after kids was running, her best times in her late 30s, which would be the equivalent of like a 42-year-old male who, I don't know, like there's not even a biological equivalent to insert like childbirth into there.
Right.
Right.
Or look at like a Justin Gatlin who's running his best times deep into his career. What makes that possible? His brain literally can't move as fast. They've seen this with esports gamers. 13-year-olds, if they understand the game, 13-year-olds dominate 17-year-olds because the 17-year-olds' thumbs can't move as fast as it's already, that aging has already started. It's already happening. And you only notice it, which means you only notice the fatigue, and the fatigue mounts as the outputs go higher, right? So you can train, talk about maxing out every day. You can max out a little kid every day. You can max them out twice a day. Their maxes, their outputs aren't even high enough to cause adaptation in their own body. They don't create any fatigue. That's why we use like brief maximal tension and, 3 rep, 5 rep, these slightly higher rep ranges, because they are able to create more tension, which gives them this quasi maximal stimulus.
Right.
But with older kids, you try, I'm good friends with Dave Hoff. If I tried to have Dave Hoff do the sets and rep schemes that I have my kids do, he would literally die because his outputs are so high. Like he'd have a heart attack and die. If I have them try to do his workouts, they're not strong enough to get the stimulus from him.
Right.
Likewise with sprinters, the top level sprinters run less. Because if you're running 26, 27 miles per hour, that's such a that's a devastating stimulus. That'll destroy you. This is also, side note, this is how you can tell a lot of track methodologies that are ruined by steroids, where, super high volumes, they get passed down and popularized in high school and middle school, and they break young kids
Correct.
And you go, how could a faster mature athlete endure those exposures? Because their efforts would all be so much more intense. It'd be so much more devastating. And yet it's ruining like young kids. They can't even do it. And you go, oh, you need needles to do those programs. They're leaving a huge chapter out of that book that they're selling.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But so all of it, and the weird thing
human
is
development to that part of it. Like that's what is not understood. It's also funny because coaches try to coach in that manner, and it's not even possible, and they get mad at the athlete. You know what I mean? It's like,
right. Well, that's it. Like every track coach, if you're a coach, think right now. Think about your freshman athletes. I don't care what sport it is. If you've got like 10 kids, then you probably have this scenario playing out in front of you right now. You have a freshman who you're so excited about. And you see where they could go. And they give great effort. They hang on every word that you say. They're like a little puppy dog who just wants your approval. And they've got a little bit of ability, and that makes you so excited. Now think you've probably got a sophomore who was that freshman last year. And man, they're really good for a sophomore. They're not quite as good as you would hoped they would be, but the process is paying off. They're seeing the fruits of their labor. Maybe you thought they'd be like number 1 in their region as a sophomore, and they're like 2 or 3. They're not quite where you want them, but they look, people point out like, oh yeah, that's going to be one of the dudes in this area. Then you got a junior who was that sophomore and he was that freshman, and he's good. Like, don't get me wrong, he's good, but is he really any better than he was as a sophomore? Like maybe a little bit, but he didn't take the leap that you wanted him to take. But he's still got a pretty good attitude. He's still listening to you. You still get along great with him, and you're still thinking, man, when he's a senior, he's going to take another step forward, and he's going to be a great kid. And he's maybe the kid that you've been hoping. Maybe you got a whole class of these kids, and you've been hoping that when they mature up to seniors, because they looked so good as freshmen, they listened to everything you said. As a sophomore, they were pretty good. Like, there was so much promise. As juniors, now it's like they're almost there. And then their senior year hits. And man, they just drag ass through practice. They're like, they all look like Vince Carter in his 17th year. With the Mavericks
or some shit. Yeah. Like he just kind of like,
Their attitude starts to tank. They always say that they're hurting, and you don't believe them. Meanwhile, your practice and your training look like this. The same thing you're doing today is the same thing you were doing last year. He never complained about it last year. The same thing he was doing the year before. And he was getting pretty good results from it the year before. And the same thing he was doing as a freshman, and he was bought hook, line, and sinker, and he never had any complaints. And then he had very spare complaints. And now he's complaining all the time. And you go, oh man, he turned into a bad kid. And the reality is no. When he was near puberty, he was on nature's steroids, and he could recover from anything you threw at him.
Anything.
He felt good. His outputs were also relatively low, so he didn't cause much damage to himself no matter what you threw at him. As a sophomore, he's not recovering quite as well, but he's still progressing at such a rate that neither one of you notice. As a junior, you see his progress is slowing down, and you can't put your finger on why, but he's still good, so you're not too worried about it. And then as a senior, he's broken and he's frustrated. And he never questioned you, but now because he hurts, because he's also, you got to think about it from the athlete's perspective. He was 16 the year before, and he had never slowed down. He was 15. He had never slowed down. He had always he shows up, he gets better. That's the relationship that y'all always had. He never had to question anything. And now suddenly, for the first time, he's not just getting better. And so he starts questioning. And now for the first time, things aren't really going as like, for the first time, he's encountering uncertainty and he's projecting it onto you as a coach. And now you're having that static. And the reality is, like, if you see this cycle playing out over and over again, if you can think of who is this year's model of that kid, change something within your program so that the junior version of that kid does not turn into the senior version. Change something so that that sophomore doesn't turn into the junior. Oftentimes, if you're measuring everything, you can see it coming. You can say to your young kids, like, no, y'all can run another. But my older kids, man, you know, you're getting slower already. Like, call it there, go in, you know, like having a kid ride out at like a consistent 7 or 8 on sort of an effort consistency scale over 4 years is going to beat the kid who, you know, burns bright at 10, because that kid's also going to be super demanding. And if you can't always be one step ahead of him, he's going to get frustrated and he's going to start looking for answers elsewhere. And he's going to start questioning you as a coach.
Totally agree. And I think this generation is very different when it comes to that, in terms of questioning things, along with parents too, with the with social media the way it is, the access to more things and broaden the horizon, right? I mean, if you look back at how we talk about this all the time, most people coached the way they were coached, right? And it was more of that militant discipline. You do this, no questions asked, like that's how it is. And then if an issue arose, now it's mom, dad, like coach did Hey, you listen to coach, right? That has totally changed in this world that we live in, where, you know, issue arises, kid gets in the car and it's, well, your coach doesn't know or, you know what I mean? So the questioning aspect and looking for answers is something that, you know, even, you know, look, it's been changing for a while, but like as recent as it is, I think it's so different.
Yeah. Answers weren't available in the middle of the week.
Right.
That's right. You know, if
I didn't like answer 2 seconds after practice.
Yeah. If I didn't like what
some of these
coach
kids have it in their hand looking for the answer, you know, like they have it. They're like, coach, you're wrong. You know, like, or coach, this guy says this, you know, like, all right, buddy. You know, so that's why coaches have to, you know, you got to be on your shit. Like,
that's, you know, the adaptation part of what you're talking about, like for our audience, I think it's important to understand that adapting your program to the individual as much as you can. Obviously, when you're in team training, it's harder, right? You're a coach, and obviously you're coaching 100 kids, and it's hard.
Right. Even with that, I coach about 230 kids right now.
Well, that's where measuring stuff helps tremendous.
Yeah, but I only have, like, people ask me all the time. They go like, "Well, how do you train your basketball team?" My basketball team trains at the same time as my wrestling team.
Right.
Yeah.
And they do this. I write the same workout up on the board. The same.
Now, Coach, in comparison, is it differentiate male female?
No.
Same workout.
No. I write the same workout up on the board. Now, some of my, you know, like, I'm going to sort of coach it differently. My younger kids, I want them to get through everything. My older kids, I'm going to be, you know, shutting them down earlier. I'm going to be, you know, I'm not worried if my older kids are hitting, you know, their best numbers on their 5th or 6th exercise of the day. I'm worried, you know, are you jumping higher? Are you running faster? Okay. You know, like, but I'm every.
Did we lose him?
Did we lose Coach? Can you hear me, Dave?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Huh. But I've worked with a 32-year-old pro sprinter before. You know what he needed to improve his relative strength? You know, and by doing that, all of a sudden his splits all got better. His broad jump got better. His vertical got better. He ran a better 60. He ran a better 100. He got better when he got stronger. He had been with somebody else who told him, well, you're at this level now, you're strong enough. Well, again, he's 32. His brain is slowing down, so he needs to displace himself more per step. How do you do that? His ground contacts are getting longer. Your ground contacts are getting longer to allow you to push longer. So he was training right alongside a college tight end and right alongside a college pitcher. The college pitcher, his 40 dropped from a 4.9 to a 4.48 in the same amount of time. He wasn't even training for that. He went from throwing 92 to 95. He needed the 5'9" college pitcher, the 6'5" tight end, and the 6'3" sprinter all needed the same thing. They needed to get stronger, and they needed to get stronger in shorter durations of time, and they needed to improve their body's sort of capacity for more high rep or more high intensity outputs, which is a slow process, right? You can get the same person to eventually, like a lot of coaches, they want to do everything on like week one, day one, week one, and their kids are rolling around on the ground puking. And I go, that's great. If your kids are puking, then that means they're not going to run a PR and a fly 10 or a PR and a jump for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Right.
You're
You just wipe them out. Yeah, you're done. You're done.
That happens.
You just made yourself easier to beat. You just made yourself easier to fire. You just made, in some instances, you just made your kids, dinner table less secure.
Right.
I hope you felt real tough about doing it.
It's
right. Nice job, buddy.
It's one of it. By the way, it's still, and as you push down the levels, when you get towards youth, it's worse.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of the things that I still see all the time. Like I hear it. If my son comes out of it, like I coach my son in football. We apply a lot of sprint-based football stuff. With me working with my son directly, I try to focus on adapting him.